And for all those who haven't turned off their camera, let's have a big smile. And Shaw, maybe you can take a few pictures of screenshots of all the Hollywood squares we've got here.
All right,
All
sounds
right.
great. Ready.
Smile,
All right,
wave.
everybody's turning on the videos now. Okay,
We're going to win
one,
this
two,
thing. Hooray.
cheese. Okay, let me take a few, looks like there's plenty of people. I have to do another place, another screen here.
Okay.
Um,
You should do your screen.
yeah,
So you do
right,
that, and I will
yeah,
continue. Keep smiling, folks.
all right.
'Cause we are going to win if we all do our work. All right. So I'm Deb Paul, chairperson of Indivisible Mass Coalition from the 5th Congressional District, and co-hosting with me and moderating this evening are the other board members that you see: Karen Noti Valley from the 1st Congressional District, Shaw Yang from the 3rd, Jill Lukart from the 7th Congressional District, and Pam Poindexter from the 9th. Parmalee Eastman from the 2nd Congressional District is also with us tonight. Welcome, everyone. We are modifying our opening announcements and introductions tonight, making them shorter so that we can maximize our time with Senator Warren. We assume that all on this call come with good intentions and will be respectful of one another. I've abbreviated our land acknowledgement, so I wish to say that wherever you go in America, you are on Indigenous land. We recognize the Indigenous people's legacy, their ongoing strength, resilience, and their continuing presence. Reminder to please introduce yourselves in the chat. This meeting, again, is being recorded. If you want to remain private, turn off your camera and use your first name only. To ask questions in the chat, remember, please type ask and then your question. That way our chat moderators, Karen Noti Valley and Jill Lukart, will be able to find your question easily. It makes things go much faster. So just type ask and then your question. All will be on mute today, except for the speakers, so we can hear our speakers clearly. Thank you all again for joining and making the time to be here in the Indivisible community this evening with Senator Warren. We are in full swing election season now. It is 42 days out. 3 states have started their early voting. And remember, the last day to vote is November 5th, not the 1st. It is now my pleasure to introduce our board member, Karen Noti Valley, who lives in the 1st Congressional District, was elected to her town school committee last year. Thank you, Karen, for doing that, and also leads her town Dems committee. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Deb. We're delighted to welcome Senator Elizabeth Warren, our senator representing all of us in Massachusetts, to address all of you, our wonderfully active Indivisible Mass Coalition statewide community. It's pretty safe to say everyone here has probably taken some individual action or many actions to help elect and re-elect Senator Warren, and we are going to do it again in November. Since she was first elected to the Senate in 2012, Elizabeth Warren has fought tirelessly for the working families in Massachusetts and delivered results. Senator Warren has driven the national conversation as one of the country's leading progressive voices, advancing bold ideas to end Washington corruption, strengthen our democracy, and rebuild the middle class. Senator Warren wakes up every day ready to fight on behalf of the working families of Massachusetts. Senator Warren gets things done, bringing student loan debt cancellation to the president's desk, holding big banks accountable, passing a bipartisan bill to lower hearing aid costs, just to highlight a few. Senator Warren and Democrats have really delivered for us, despite the obstacles they face, including having the slimmest majority in the Senate. From the American Rescue Plan funds to infrastructure law to the Inflation Reduction Act. Wow, the list of legislative accomplishments goes on, but there's always more work to do. Without delay, I proudly introduce Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Deb, are you unmuting?
I
Senator
will.
Warren,
Senator, you're muted.
you're muted. Just a moment. Can you unmute yourself?
No. Okay.
Deb?
Oh. Hang on. Sorry about that.
Apologies for the delay after I said without further delay.
Technical difficulties. Okay, now you can unmute yourself, Senator. Go ahead.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right. I was saying thank you to Karen for the very kind introduction, and also saying how grateful I am to be with the good people of Indivisible. I remember how after Donald Trump was elected and many people were just ready to give up, how Indivisible really helped keep the lights on, and how we did a lot of serious fighting side by side, and how you have grown this organization and brought in other people to say, it's up to us to make our democracy work. And I am grateful for that. I'm also grateful to everybody on this call. Look, it's a beautiful evening. There are so many things you could be doing in so many other places, but you are taking the time to invest in our democracy. And I am grateful for that. You know, I just fundamentally believe that when we fight side by side, we win. We have done a lot in just the past 4 years, mostly the 2 years right after Joe Biden was elected, and we had that skinny little majority in the House, and then that tiny, tiny majority in the United States Senate. And yet we did really important things. We passed a big bill coming out of the pandemic that meant that no town in the country had to lay off firefighters or teachers or police officers or town clerks. We made that investment in our communities and they survived. And we had to do that with not a single Republican vote. We then turned around, passed the biggest infrastructure package in the history of the world. This is why we are now bringing real dollars home to Massachusetts, why we have $1.7 billion to do the Cape Cod, the first of the Cape Cod bridges, getting started on this. But it's coming to every town in Massachusetts, where the needs for rebuilding our infrastructure are enormous. We then turned around and did the biggest climate package in the history of the world. The deal happened because we paid for it with my 15% minimum tax on billionaire corporations, and could have quit there, but we did one more, and that was the CHIPS and Science Act. CHIPS is the first real industrial policy in the United States since World War II. But the part I even love the best about this is that I promised when I ran in 2012, I would do everything I could to double our investment in science. And that's what happens in the CHIPS and Science Act. We double it, and we double it for years to come. So every problem that faces us, we've got a better chance to respond because of those investments that we made. We have a big agenda in front of us. If we can get the trifecta, knock on wood, and that means the House, the Senate, and the White House, then Democrats will be relentless. We will be relentless in protecting access to abortion all across the country. We will be relentless in passing Voting Rights Act, the right to vote, the right to get your vote counted, anti-gerrymandering, and my personal favorite, DC statehood. And we will pass the PRO Act to make it possible for anyone who wants to join a union and to force employers to come to the bargaining table. And that's just the first 3 weeks. After that, we're going to tackle the housing crisis head on. I've got a great plan around this. I hope somebody asks me. And we are going to make the investment in childcare the way we have in roads and bridges, because childcare is basic infrastructure for mamas and daddies who want to work. Look, ultimately, I think elections are about who you fight for. Donald Trump, the guys at the top, they think you fight for the billionaires and the billionaire corporations. I'm a Democrat, and Democrats fight to build opportunity, not for just that handful at the top, but to build opportunity for all of us. So again, thank you for having me. Let's do some questions. Let's dig in.
Following up, Senator, on your comment about the importance of abortion and
Yep.
reproductive rights, you had commented about what happens in terms of control of the Senate.
Excellent question. So understand this. Now that we no longer have the constitutional protection on Roe versus Wade, that has done two things, and we're watching part of it, and that is the states that have they have passed some really horrible abortion laws. And I did another hearing today on this. More than 30% of all women in the United States now live in a state that effectively bans access to abortion. And this means that a woman, for example, that is in the middle of a miscarriage, who goes into an emergency room, is examined by a doctor. Doctor knows what the medical care will be, but can't deliver it yet because she's not close enough to dead. And so they send her back out to the parking lot to hemorrhage for a few more hours, hoping she'll make it in just before she dies so they can give her the care that she needs. The only way we put a stop to this is we pass a law that puts Roe versus Wade back in place. And that will take Democratic control of the House, Democratic control of the Senate, even with the skinniest possible majority, and Kamala Harris and the White House to sign it into law. So that's half of the equation. But you say, hey, I'm sitting here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is not going to do that. And yes, I'm very sorry for people around the country, but at least we're okay here in Massachusetts, and we'll help people who come here needing help. Not going to work that way. If we lose control of the Senate, not only can we not pass Roe versus Wade, that means whatever the president does, there's no way to stop them. So read Project 2025, listen to what Donald Trump and particularly J.D. Vance have already said. They're coming for a nationwide abortion ban. J.D. Vance, just a few months ago, wrote a letter to the Department of Justice saying, enforce the Comstock Act, which would mean any instrument used in an abortion cannot be passed through interstate commerce. Takes mifepristone off the market. And if Republicans have control of the Senate, there's nothing we can do about it. Some people sit around and say, well, it's not that bad, because if we had 49 Republicans and Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski, gee, that would give you 51. What matters is the day you register, when you're sworn in. How many Democrats are there and how many Republicans? And if there are more Republicans than there are Democrats, they decide what gets voted on, which means the extremists in their party decide. They're never going to bring a bill to the floor that has protection from Roe versus Wade if they've got two Republicans who want to do it and all the Democrats. It's never coming forward. So I really can't emphasize this enough. The threat on Roe versus Wade to us in Massachusetts is real, and we're watching this unfold around the country. So this is a fight that matters to us in a very personal way, and of course matters for anybody who cares about our friends, our family members who live elsewhere in the country. So we got to preserve that Senate majority.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you.
Sort of along the same lines of having the votes, getting that trifecta, having the votes, and protecting our rights and moving forward. how do we strategize on eliminating the electoral college?
Ah,
Just throw that right out there.
yeah, just put it right out there.
And
So listen, I'm going to be really blunt because you all are sophisticated and trying to figure out what we can do here. We have a real problem, obviously. Democrats win the majority, and in almost every democracy on earth, that would be good enough. Because of the Electoral College, it's not. That's going to take constitutional amendment, and that is one tough sucker. I'm not saying it's not worth fighting for, but I just want to say there's going to be other things we're going to have to do between here and there. Now, the Interstate Compact that is close, that says where the states promise that if a majority of them would put someone over the top, right, to win. In other words, it's a way to reintroduce the popular vote themselves, is actually, what is it now, 2 states away? Is that right? Someone's nodding who's following this more closely than I'm all in on this. In other words, but there are other ways to try to build protection around the vote. And it's not that I don't want to do the Electoral College revision. I do, but that's going to be an arduous process, and we're going to have to make a long-term commitment to do it. There's one alternative. I also want to make a pitch for a second alternative. I'm willing to put my nickels on democracy, and that means the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Right to vote, right to get your vote counted, anti-gerrymandering will be huge for us, huge. And I'm pushing it out there. It's time for DC statehood. DC has already voted. They would not be the smallest state. They would not be the second smallest state. It's time for DC to become a state. And obviously, that also helps in the overall representation and making democracy function better. And I'll mention a third one. We got to get rid of the filibuster. And I hope you all noticed today, Kamala said she wants to get rid of the filibuster because we keep empowering an extremist minority. And this is just nuts. It is anti-democrat, small d democratic to do that and against our interests. You know, Republicans, all they want to do is cut taxes. And by the way, you can do taxes with 50 votes. They don't want to do things like build childcare and climate and gun safety and immigration. They don't want to do any of that stuff that takes 60 votes to get it done. So they love the filibuster because it lets them block everything that Democrats want to do while they go forward with the one thing they do want to do, and that is they get out there and they just cut taxes again. So there are things we can do that are more helpful, and God bless a group like Indivisible. We're just going to stay in it persistently over a long enough arc to get rid of the Electoral College. I am 100% in.
And you hit the nail on the head. There was broader questions around that in terms of the protection of democracy. So obviously we love to hear your plans.
Yes, but it really is. It is around voting and getting rid of the filibuster. These are like the most protective things we can do around democracy. Then I'm going to pitch one other, and I'll do it really quickly just to underscore this. I hope everybody's sitting down. I have been working for 2 years on a bill with Lindsey Graham. Yeah, that Lindsey Graham. But it's a tech bill because I am deeply concerned about how we're getting our news, about who's taking it over, about the dominance of one corporate entity or two. So we got a lot of work to do in that space. I know you all don't want to spend a lot of time digging into it, but we have to make room to do that. And we also, another reason to elect Kamala Harris to the White House is so we can keep our antitrust enforcers, Lena Khan at the FTC and Jonathan Cantor at the Department of Justice, pushing back against these giant corporations. They're eating us alive, our country. We got to push back against private equity. You're not going to be surprised to know. I've got the big bill on private equity. I'm trying to build the coalition here in DC. They're going to kill our healthcare system, but they're They're coming after everything. They're coming after nursing homes, veterinary practices, funeral homes. They wiped out department stores. Anybody remember Sears or Kmart or my personal favorite, Toys R Us? Spent many happy hours with grandchildren there. And this is the corporatization. And I'm for business. I'm all for business, but I want to see competitive markets. And this idea that a handful of giant corporations are just going to run this country, this is something we have to be willing to fight back against. So I think all those pieces fit together in the democracy question.
Thank you.
You bet. It's a good question. Thanks, Karen.
Senator, your last part of your answer that goes to economics and finance cues to a number of questions that people ask about the economy being top on voters' lists.
Mhm.
What, and your thoughts about what Kamala Harris can do in terms of promoting, adding to her agenda in terms of additional economic policies. Someone specifically asked about, is there anything that could be done to lower public and private college tuition in general, but also in Massachusetts?
Yeah, make a bigger public investment in them. When I went to college, it was $50 a semester because I went to a local commuter school. But be clear on this, Massachusetts, back around the turn of the century before talking at 2000, before the crash in 2008, basically the taxpayers put in about $3 out of every 4 of the total cost to send a youngster to one of our state universities. Today, taxpayers put in $1 out of $4. Who puts in the other 3? The answer is the families. And for families that can afford to write a check, okay, fine. But this is why student loan debt has gone through the roof. For families that cannot afford to sit down and write a check, basically as a government, we have just said, then load up on debt. And now we're watching the consequences of that. This student loan debt is crushing people. They can't save up to buy a home. Some of them can't get married. They can't start a small business. They can't save for retirement. We are crushing their economic prospects. So this is one of those, I work on the student loan debt issue because it's right in front of us. But the real issue, and I'm glad the question came this way, the best investment we can make as a nation, the very best, is in our children. And the 2 places we can make that investment is more so is 0 to 5. And that's, I call it childcare, but it's childcare, early childhood education. They're together. And the benefits are not just that mama and daddy can go to work, not just that we pay childcare providers commensurate with the responsibilities they take on and according to their training, but it's also good outcomes for those babies that you can measure 20 years down the line, that they're more likely to make it through high school, more likely to make it through college, more likely to have higher earnings when we make that early investment. But the other big investment we can make is when they graduate from high school, technical school, 2-year school, 4-year school, even graduate school. Think of it this way. A grateful nation said to returning GIs, just if you want to go to college, we will pay for it. And look, there were problems in how it was done. The opportunities were not there for Black returning soldiers the way they were for white returning soldiers. But just looking at the ones who did get the benefit, for every dollar the taxpayers put in, we got $7 back immediately in how these people earned and paid their own taxes. And we built the most robust economy the world had ever seen. Those are investments that pay off for a nation, and I am willing to fight for them all the way. And do you know why we don't do, I'll just add one more. I'm so wound up on this. Do you know why we don't do this? We don't do this because Bill Gates doesn't want to pay taxes, because Elon Musk doesn't want to pay taxes. They sit on literally billions of dollars in wealth, which they borrow against so that they won't trigger any taxes. And they don't pay taxes, so our state is starved, Our communities are starved, and we have to turn around to the kids who are from poorer families, middle-class families, and say, you guys have to pick up the ticket to pay for the investment in our nation that is your education. For me, that is the wrong way to look at it. We're going to have a big tax fight coming up at the beginning of 2025. I hope the people in Massachusetts will reelect me to send me to Washington for that tax fight, because that tax fight is going to be about choices. Are we going to say that billionaires get to continue to pay taxes at a lower rate than a Boston public school teacher? Or are we going to say they're going to pay their taxes and we're going to use that money to invest in education, to invest in childcare, to invest in housing, to invest in growing America's middle class? You bet.
Thank you.
You can tell I don't get too excited.
Yeah, Senator Warren, we have a number of questions that were
Sure.
pre-submitted and filling up the chat pretty much with some regularity about the Israel and Gaza.
Yep.
And for some thanks to your office for calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And also, I think there's this group is very, passionate, as a lot of us Americans are, about this issue, but also we're coming up on October 7th. So it's, front of mind. So because there's a number of questions, I don't want to hit on one specific question, but if you could just let us know, give us maybe some few thoughts on your thoughts, the plans, and, what can be done for to improve the humanitarian aid, push for the ceasefire, sort of improve the situation in whatever way that we can.
So I appreciate the question. I just met this morning with the aunt of one of the hostages who was killed a couple of weeks ago. And she just had one ask. She said, would you please start every discussion by saying, release the hostages and end the war? I mean, but we got to do both of these things. And the third thing we've got to do is flood humanitarian relief into Gaza. But more than anything else, we need to push both parties to the negotiating table to hammer out a deal. And right now it appears that nobody is interested in peace. We need a two-state solution where two peoples are able to live side by side, self-determination, dignity, nobody runs over anybody else or controls anybody else, and that they build security. And that security may have to be guaranteed by others in the region and even outside the region. But that has to be where we are aiming. I am so frustrated over how long I have said those same sentences and how little progress we have made. Benjamin Netanyahu, in my view, is not working in the interests of anyone in the region. The humanitarian disaster that he has created in Gaza is obscene. Blocking access to humanitarian aid is a crime under international law. And his refusal to let to come to the negotiating table so that we can actually get some resolution and get some medical aid and food aid and housing aid in to Gaza is obscene. I feel like he watches out for himself and for no one else. He's made no secret of how he hopes this election turns out and who he hopes wins it. And I just hope that we will push even harder against him. And I want to be clear, and against Hamas. We need to be pushing in all directions. because the people who get caught in the middle are babies and mamas and daddies and members of families who are not combatants, and yet whose lives are destroyed by what is happening over there. And I am enormously frustrated, but I will stay in this fight because it is the right thing to do. And I will keep speaking out.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have a lot of questions, including why not just stop giving them our weapons. However, I have to acknowledge that it is 7:32 and Senator Warren, your staff is asking if you could please jump off, unfortunately.
I am so sorry. I know. And part of it is I answer these questions too long because
Fired up.
always engaged on all the details. But I'm going to go do one of the national programs. I'm going to go do television. And this is my opportunity. I'm going to go do Chris Hayes.
Okay,
And
we'll see you there.
while I'm doing Chris Hayes, I just want to tell you all, one of the things I'm going to do is suggest to a national audience that people think about sending money to Florida and Texas because we are competitive there now. And we're coming into this last 42 days. And this is a time when contributions might be able to make a difference. So I'm going to make that little pitch when I'm talking to Chris Hayes. And just remind everyone again, yes, 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 I'm Kamala. That's job number one. But job number two is hang on to the Senate. If
Yes.
we don't have the Senate, even if we have Kamala, we will get no judges other than judges that the Republicans want. So we got to have that Senate. So thank you. You guys are the best. I would stay and talk for the next 3 hours, but thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to send the rest of the questions over to your staff, and then hopefully they can work on an answer and get back, and we can send it back to our audience. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren. Stay with us because up next is Nancy Brown. She is a voter protection advocate, and you will want to hear from her because we have a lot of voter protection work to do in order to keep all the votes that we are going to cast all around the nation. Let me make Nancy a co-host and do an introduction for her, and we'll turn it over to her. She's going to do a presentation, and then we can ask her questions. Make co-host. Okay. All right, Nancy. Let me get over to my notes. Okay. Here we go. All right. So thank you everybody for hanging in with us and welcome Nancy. Nancy is a resident of Brookline. She is on the leadership team of voter protection professionals, or Vote Pro Pros, an all virtual national collection of 2,400 volunteers fighting voter suppression nationwide year-round around the country, the states and the federal level. So it's national, local, and federal. Nancy is a retired attorney who practiced law at a national law firm, worked as a senior philanthropic advisor at several organizations, and founded and ran a business that provided philanthropic advisory services to 39 families for 2 decades before she sold it 3 years ago and began her journey into voter protection work. She was one of the founding members of Vote Pro Pros in 2020, and I'm so pleased to welcome you with us today, Nancy. Over to you. And I will spotlight you. You can turn your turn your mute off so we can hear you.
Thank you. I've never had to follow Elizabeth Warren before, so that's quite a challenge.
You're up for it.
I'm going to start with a few slides, and then I'm going to answer questions. Hold on a second. I'm just going to share the screen here. And okay. Can everyone see that? Okay. So I just want to mention, oops, pop up here. So we started organically as an organization back in 2020 during the general election, the 2020 general election, and the Georgia runoff in 2021 with the senatorial runoff, Warnock and Ossoff. And we decided after that to stay together. And we provide voter protection, and I'll define that for you the way we define it, services to a number of partners, or we call clients, including state, local, and federal Democratic parties. That includes the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCCC, and as I said, local Democratic parties as well. And they're our clients, but what we do is very much voter-centered. So we use sort of a case management format to work with voters to make sure that that they're registered to vote, and that their vote will count. It can be cast without suppression and can be counted. We do our work virtually with our computers and our phones. We do recruit people to do work on the ground, such as poll observers. And also right now we're recruiting cure canvassers for Pennsylvania to help knock on doors to cure ballots in Pennsylvania. So that goes along as a companion piece with our very vigorous Pennsylvania projects that are run by Melanie Galloway. And they have teams of ballot curers for Pennsylvania, and each team covers 5 counties. Let's see here. We also work with very local organizations, national and local voting rights organizations, like All Voting is Local, Project Vote, Vote Writers, the ACLU, Common Cause, and other organizations like that. And
Yes,
as
quick question, sorry to interrupt. Were
Yes.
your slides supposed to be moving along
Oh.
as you present different topics? Because we're still on the first
Yes,
one.
I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm used to having somebody do my slides for me. I apologize about that. So as I said, the voter is the center of our story and our work. And we help them. We started this program about 7 months ago, where we were calling voters who had become inactive. They'd been thrown off the voting rolls in many cases in various swing states. And we were calling them to let them know that they were no longer registered and to help them re-register. The Democratic Party, then the National Democratic Party, the Harris campaign, contacted us at the end of August and asked us to stand up that program nationwide for them. So we're now doing the same thing under the auspices of the Harris campaign in a number of different swing states. I just wanted to mention that when we do that, we call, we text. Sometimes we're using an automatic dialer. Sometimes we're using our own phones or a Google Voice number. And sometimes we're texting. And the purpose is we need to really increase the number of registered Democrats or independents who vote Democratic so that we can win this election. Right now we have a bit of a shortfall. So that is really important. That project will eventually turn into what's called ballot curing, where you probably know about this, but it's where people vote by mail or absentee ballot, and they make an error on their ballot and it's rejected. So oftentimes they do not know it's rejected, and we are the first ones to tell them that's rejected. And then we help them cure or fix their ballot by the time they need to, depending on the state laws, so that their vote will then count. Let's see. I'm going to, and The other thing we do is we also help voters apply or reapply for mail-in or absentee ballots. A lot of people don't know it, but they're no longer getting their mail-in ballots because they've moved or something else has happened where that ballot is not being forwarded to them. And in this country, mail-in ballots are not forwardable. So they often, again, do not know that they're not getting that mail-in ballot. So we have to get them to reapply for their mail-in ballots because many people, that is the primary way they vote, or they have to vote that way in many cases. We also, as I mentioned, help voters whose mail-in ballots have been rejected, and we help them let them know that they've been rejected and help them cure their ballots in time for their vote to count. We also staff hotlines and boiler rooms, and we set up hotlines and train hotline volunteers. We also do things like recruit poll observers in swing states. And those are our eyes and ears on the ground at the polling places during early voting on an election day. And they really can keep an eye on the polling places to make sure there's no funny business going on. Also, so that if there's a problem, for instance, with the voting machines, we make sure that that gets fixed right away. If there are long lines, we call in the Democratic Party and we have them send more people and fix that problem in the local polling place. We also fight election, sorry, go to the next slide. We also fight election interference and the efforts preventing the results of elections. We do that by, as I said, recruiting, training, and scheduling poll observers. And since 2021, we have run a research project for the Dems in several swing states, researching people who are election workers, also board of election members, also canvass members, who are often the people that certify the elections, just to look for election deniers. And we have found a lot of election deniers, MAGA election deniers, and that is very useful for the Democratic Party to know. In Michigan in 2020, I ran a project where we were looking for people in the rural counties of Michigan. They suspected this was happening, who had signed up as Democratic poll workers, and they were actually MAGA Republicans, MAGA election deniers. And we were able to alert the Democratic Party to that, and that was very helpful to them to help identify those people that could be a problem in causing a disruption to the election, and to create chaos and an excuse not to certify the election. We also investigated some not cure canvassers, the ballot canvassers, people who certify the elections in the counties in several states. And we investigated to find out whether there were issues going on that would prevent certification. I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, there were some counties where the canvassers refused to certify, particularly in Wayne County, and eventually they were forced to certify. But even in Wayne County after that, some of the canvassers of the election ballot canvassers tried to change their vote and tried to decertify the election. So this is going to be a big problem, obviously, in this election. There's a lot more preparation for it. We can talk about that later. But the purpose of a lot of these people are obviously to create confusion, to create delay, to create the appearance of an inefficient or incapable or incompetent election system, which is definitely not the case. So we're trying to help our election workers fight back against that. I just want to go into a couple of quickly current projects we have going at the moment. there's a project I called NIC, and that is the one I mentioned, which is the National Enactus and Cure Project. And that we're doing for the Democratic Party for the Harris campaign in several states. I think there's somebody can put in the chat the link to that project. And that is, there's you can go to the Mobilize link and sign up for the phone banks. You can also work in our Slack channel on this project. There are FAQs, there's training at every phone bank, and they are calling and texting and emailing and leaving voicemail messages for voters who have been thrown off the rolls, who have challenges to their registration and to their vote, and we're helping them re-register, or we're helping them in some cases with the challenges they're enduring. And that's a really, really useful, and that will turn into ballot curing, by the way. This other project that might be of interest is a voter protection hotline for curing. And we're doing for the Democratic Congressional Committee. And it's really kind of an emergency strike force. And the whole purpose is, as Elizabeth Warren was saying, getting back the Senate, or keeping the Senate is very important. And we feel really strongly in the Democratic Party that getting back the House is critical, both for Kamala, if she wins in order to pass legislation, and also if she doesn't win, as a bulwark against a Trump trifecta. So they're very focused on this. And the way we're helping out is using ballot curing, which we used in 2020 to put Wisconsin over the top for President Biden, and to put Georgia over the top for President Biden. We're using it in this election to help put our congressional race candidates over the top in these flippable districts that can really make a difference in flipping the House. So that's a strike force. They're doing trainings. There's a link in the chat. I think they're putting that in where you can sign up for those. It's really dynamic. There's a lot of learning. There's a big learning curve. You're going to be learning the laws of a lot of different states. But it's a really powerful and very impactful project that I highly recommend. Let's see, and I'm not watching my time. So, okay, I think we'll end with that. There's more to talk about, but I'll get rid of this. I'll stop sharing. And
thank you. That was very helpful. And I think we'll move over to see if we have any questions.
yes.
Karen, have you got any questions for us?
Yeah, so primarily the main question I've seen a couple of times is, do you need hotline volunteers? And I know that I think Pam has been putting some links in the chat. But if you could elaborate on what the staffing needs might be.
Absolutely. So this hotline I just mentioned is specifically for ballot curing. The training is going on now, but the ballot curing will start at the end of September or beginning of October. The other voter protection hotlines that are active that we helped stand up and also did the training for are in North Carolina and Georgia. And I can send, if anybody's interested in those, I can send the links to those. There's also, those are really much in need, very much in need, particularly Georgia, I would say right now. Wisconsin has a very strong voter protection hotline already because they have a very strong voter protection group under the Democratic Party. So does Wisconsin. I would say that we also really do not do hotline in Pennsylvania, but the Pennsylvania hotline, I would say, is in need as well. And I can get you that link if you want that. The Nevada is going to need a hotline people, as is Arizona. Arizona maybe less so. They have quite a few volunteers there already. But it really, and things are shifting from day to day. We have to shift and pivot quickly with our partners because things are changing on the ground from day to day. So what we're doing for them actually changes on the ground. So sometimes you'll be working on a project and the project manager will shift quickly into something else that's related to what you're doing, but slightly different. So there's a requirement for flexibility and the ability to shift.
Okay, and yeah.
Sorry, I just made the note that, yes, somebody is requesting you send the hotline for North Carolina. So if you would send us all those hotline links, we
Sure.
can out to the folks on the call.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Karen.
And so that brings us to the next question in the chat. PM is asking, I was contacted by the Georgia Dems to help with the voter protection process. Should I work with them or vote
Sure.
pros?
Well, I think Georgia is a really critical state, and we're, as you've read recently, there's, it's going to be a tough battle in Georgia. So I would say it's going to be a tough battle in Arizona. It's going to be a tough battle in North Carolina. So I would say Georgia, yes, go to do Georgia, or North Carolina or Arizona. There's going to be a tough battle there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you want to share with us about after the election, what kind of work you're going to be doing to help protect or get all the votes counted? Because you mentioned that during your talk.
Sure. We also put together data from our talks with voters who have been suppressed. For instance, back in 2020, there was a group called True the Vote in Texas who sent out 600,000 letters to voters during the pandemic, to people who are permanent residents of Georgia, but who had to move temporarily for jobs. And they sent this threatening letter saying that you do realize that if you're not living in the state of Georgia, you can't vote in the state in Georgia. And if you try to do that, you're going to be put in jail, you're going to be arrested. So we interviewed a lot of these people, our group did, and we provided that to the Senate committee, the Democratic Senate committee, who presented a whole book of our interviews for this investigative project they had. So we do that kind of work as well.
Was that,
we have a lawyer.
Sorry, was that pure voter intimidation? Is that even legal? If they're legal residents and they travel to work, aren't they still allowed to?
No, they're still allowed to vote. Yes, they can use mail-in ballots, and they were trying to. It was pure voter intimidation.
Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't okay. It wasn't legal, justified. Got it.
Right.
And it works.
It works. It does work.
So do you call those folks? How do you find out when people are not going to get their ballots, when they're assuming they're going to, and you're saying that we call them and notify them that they have to request their ballot, it's not coming to them? How do you do that?
We get the lists from our partners, our clients, from the Democratic Party, for instance. So we started doing this in Nevada and in Pennsylvania, where we had the lists. And then we were doing it because we already had these relationships with them, and in Arizona. And then the Democratic Party saw what we were doing, and they decided they wanted to do that nationwide, in the swing states, battleground states. But we work for partners or clients. We do not have the lists ourselves. Our partners have the lists.
Got it. Okay. I'm looking at the time and we have 3 minutes left, and I know there's other questions. People are interested in taking the training, and it looks like the ballot curate training was tonight. Will there be another one? Nancy,
Yes.
if you would send me more links. I just want to announce, and Pam just posted. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you can give them my contact information too. And I'm happy to answer questions by email or by text anytime.
All right. We will gather up this information, and on Friday at 11:30, the Safeguard Elections team and the Racial Justice and Equity team are going to be meeting to talk about voter protection, and we'll have, once again, all the links to share out. We will send them out in an email as well. I know that a lot of people want to do this and are interested in helping. So they'll probably shift after after canvassing, they'll
Sure.
shift gears. And you said in Pennsylvania, just to clarify, you're curing ballots at the door right now?
We're
You're
actually,
doing
no,
that?
we're gonna start curing ballots by phone and by text and by social media. In some cases, we use social media to contact people. We did that in Colorado in 2022. We're going to be doing it, we do it virtually.
Okay,
But we also, in our newsletter, we are promoting and we are recruiting cure canvassers who will knock on doors in Pennsylvania to cure
okay,
as our helpers. So if we can't get a hold of people, we're going to be sending people to the doors
okay.
and to knock on the doors, because we did that in Georgia and it's very effective. And we work as a team. So the teams of people working in each team has 5 counties in Pennsylvania, because every county does things differently. In fact, every voting town, every town does things differently. So there could be, so they're going to be doing the curing virtually, and then they'll have partners on the ground who'll be knocking on the doors.
For the people that they can't contact either by phone or by text or by
Yeah.
social. Okay, so if
And
they
then-
can't get a hold of them, then you go to their door.
Yes, and then we'll be working with them. We'll be doing 3-way calls so that we'll have our person on the ground calling in, and we'll be with them every step of the way while working with the voter. So there's a 3-way call going on with, so it really is effective. We did that in Georgia in 2020. It's an amazing, and it's really rewarding too. I think there's nothing like helping somebody get over the finish line with their ballot. Somebody who really tried to vote, who really wants to vote, and they just made some little error and their ballot won't count if you don't help them.
Okay, great. That's a great closing pitch. We want every vote counted, and we need people to help cure those last ballot sets to make sure that we can get over the finish line with every single vote, because this election, every single vote.
Every single vote will count. It's going to be so close, so close.
Yep.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. And we will look forward to getting the updated links. Thank you, everybody, for joining. All the links for more canvassing, more text banking, more phone banking, and now ballot curing training and beginning that work is available. Thanks all for hanging in there. I do want to put in a plug for Field Team 6. They have gotten lots of donations and funding. They're offering free text banks. I joined them on Saturday and Sunday. We text bank 2 million people. Each million costs $40,000. And they got that funding thanks to not only the Asian community for Harris, but also the National Black Women's Organization for Harris. Lots of groups have donated, and their text banks are working beautifully. 500,000 text banks went to Florida. Know that Field Team 6's success is 30% of the text they send equals turns into registering voters. So that's 150,000, hopefully more voters that will get registered in Florida. We text banked to North Carolina, to Georgia, which is so important. We just talked about that, to Maryland to help elect the senator there. And they're doing all the swing states. They have 12 states, including Texas, including Florida. So it is an expanded text bank of swing states that they have defined. So if you have time, we shared the link. Training starts Saturday. But there's also equally great phone banks through Indivisible. There's canvassing in person. We shared those links. Thanks to Swing Left, thanks to MA for PA. And then the Democrats, the local national committee here is also canvassing, of course, not only in Massachusetts for local races, but in New Hampshire and Maine, and anybody can go up there. Let's please do that. Thanks so much. It is 8:02. Thank you for joining. Keep up the good fight. Everything you do matters. We're all in this together. And as Kamala says, when we fight, we win. And we've got to keep up the good fight. Otherwise, we're not winning, gang. So let's leave it all on the field. Thank you and good night.